course, in the middle of the winter, it looks more like the North Pole than the middle of summer. Pole like the equator.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So, tonight, Parshas Shalach. I was mentioning just before we got started, I think it's now more than a decade I'm teaching this class.
Yeah.
Time flies. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time in 10 years, which means we're over 500 classes learning together. This is the first time where the topic of the Wednesday night class overlaps and reinforces what we're learning in Shabbos morning. Typically, I learn text-based chassidus, like we'll learn from my marim inside the book. We'll read and translate and explain and discuss. And here it's more a set-up class, with all the slides and everything and all the different texts. But here in the Shabbos morning class, we sit together, we read from the book, and we're explain for a few weeks in a row one topic. And this is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first time where the two overlap. So hopefully we'll bring out some new points. I have the wrong
Shabbos morning?
I have the wrong one.
I thought you said Sunday morning.
You know what?
You missing the teacher one?
Yeah, I think I left the teacher one downstairs.
Forget it.
Yeah, forget my notes. So it's the topic. I'll just set it up and then I'll run down and get it. So the topic is a fantastic concept about worry and happiness and the balance between worrying about the different stresses we have in our life and finding calm and happiness, and how the effort to be calm, the effort to be happy when facing challenges in life has a practical impact on the outcome of the events of our lives. And it's a fascinating story. We're going to introduce it from the perspective of this week's Parsha and then the topic of the man, the bread from heaven, and go back and forth into this concept. So I'll just go real quick and get my notes, and then we'll start. Okay, so let's get started. Parshas Shalach. Now, again, so the topic for tonight is how to balance our reaction to challenges, to stresses in life. Now, at this stage, we're adults, we've grown up, and we've faced enough challenges to be able to relate to the topic, to challenges in life and worry and stresses and anxiety type of things. One thing we've learned from experience at this point is that worry isn't very helpful. When you're worrying about what might be, it's not very helpful. In fact, I heard an expression or something along the lines that when you worry about the future, then you have a bad experience. You potentially have a bad experience twice. Where you could have, or it could be that you don't have a bad experience at all. If you worry about the future, the worst case scenario is that what you worry about is going to happen, and now you've experienced it twice. So worrying is not very productive. Now, that doesn't mean, even though we've learned this lesson through experience, that doesn't mean that it's simple, that it's an easy task to stay calm, to stay focused, to be happy in the face of challenges. It is difficult. With that difficulty, part of the beginning of stepping forward and part of the beginning of improving our reactions and maintaining the appropriate balance is to realize it's unproductive, that to be concerned, to be worried. Now, what's interesting and what we're going to go over tonight as a topic is that the Torah, in fact, commands us to trust in Hashem. When it comes to situations of difficulty, when it comes to challenges, the Torah actually gives us a commandment to trust in Hashem. Now, so tonight's class, what we'll do is try to investigate the mechanics of how that works. How do we go about trusting in Hashem? Now, the Parsha context for how to trust in Hashem is this idea of food from heaven. And we'll see in the text that we handed out and we'll see in the text that are up on the screen that we have this amazing story. There's an amazing story in our Parsha, in this week's Torah portion, where as the Jews leave Egypt, and they go into the desert, you've got a practical problem. The practical problem is you take thousands, millions of people and bring them out into the desert, they need something to eat. And how are you going to survive? How's this movement going to last without food? So in this week's Torah portion, once the Jews have finally left Egypt and the Red Sea splits and they sing their big song, they kind of have like this uh-oh moment, like, be careful what you ask for, you might get it, right? We want to go out into the desert and serve God. And then when we get there, who brought the food? So what are you looking at me for? I didn't bring any food. And so it's a big trouble. It's a big challenge. And this week's Torah portion tells us about this miraculous food from heaven that God gives to what's called the manna. And it's this bread from heaven. Now, the Jews had a lot to worry about. Where your next meal is going to come from is a pretty fundamental concern, just staying alive. So what we're going to see, and what is the foundation really of the big point for tonight's class, is that just like we see in this week's Torah portion, God came through, so too is that we're going to talk about how to kind of adopt that mentality, that God will come through. All right, so the first few texts, the first text on text number 1 is in this week's Torah portion. It's the book of Exodus, chapter 16, verses 4 and 5. So the English translation reads, God said to Moses, behold, I am going to rain down for you bread from heaven, lechem min hashamayim. And the people shall go out and gather what is needed for the day so that I can test them, whether or not they will follow my teaching. That's verse 4. And then verse 5 says, and it shall be on the sixth day that when they prepare what they will bring, it will be double of what they gather every day. So here we have the classic sense, the Torah's classic example of God will provide. It's a joke. You guys maybe heard this joke before. So you guys know this phenomenon of the Baal Tshuva, right? Somebody who maybe has not a religious upbringing, they're not traditionally observant in their Judaism, and then they find it later, like maybe as their young adult life or as an adult, and then they change their whole lifestyle, right? They change the way they dress, and they change the words they say, they change what they do with their free time, and now it's a lot of praying and learning Torah, and you're doing mitzvahs. So this phenomenon, this cultural phenomenon, is the expression of Baal Tshuva. The story is told of this Baal Tshuva. He's a young man, and he becomes a Baal Tshuva, and not too long after this phenomenon, a lot of times it happens, then they get engaged and start this great big family, right? So this Baal Tshuva gets engaged, and he comes to his parents, and he tells them the good news. I got engaged. The father is a little shocked. All these things are happening so quickly, these major life changes, and now he's really gotten himself into something. The boy, he's gotten himself engaged, and he's going to start a family. So the father starts talking to his son and says, tell me, what are you going to do for a livelihood? And he says, don't worry, God will provide. God will provide a livelihood. He says, well, where are you going to live? If you have a family, you need a place to stay. He says, you don't have any money, so how are you going to pay for a place? He says, don't worry, God will provide. He said, no job, no place to stay. What are you going to, when you get married, you're going to start having kids quick. What are you going to feed your kids? Are you going to pay for private school? Every question the father's concerned about, the son has the same answer. Don't worry, God will provide. So that evening, after this conversation, the father sees he's not making any progress. He goes home and he breaks the news to his wife. Because I had a conversation with our son. He's got engaged, and he says, she says, well, what did he say? He says he's got a lot of crazy ideas. But the good news is he thinks we're God. So this is a Torah case, a classic example of God will provide, right? Go follow us out into the desert. We're going to serve God out there. What are we going to eat? Don't worry, God will provide. He rains down bread from heaven. Now, this story we'll soon see from the next text, serves as a foundation for the Jewish people throughout generations. It's a story which teaches a timeless lesson about putting our trust in God. Because, again, you couldn't have a more dire situation. You've got millions of people in a desert, nothing to eat, nowhere to go, no one to protect them. And the solution to that problem comes about in a miraculous way, bread from heaven. Now, what we're going to see in the next text 1b and 1c here on the same slide, is there are certain interesting conditions. If we dig down into the details of text 1a, like that, and Rashi does that for us, we dig down into the details, we'll find there are certain conditions which apply to this miraculous salvation. The text 1b is Rashi on the first verse, chapter 16, verse 4. So on the words, what is needed for the day, Rashi quotes and explains, when it says what is needed for a day's eating, they will gather on that day. But they will not gather today for the needs of tomorrow. So, what does this mean? It means that they're not allowed to store. They're not allowed to take anything extra. So you can imagine, you're a responsible adult, right? And like the joke, you have to provide for your family, and you have to take care and make responsible decisions. So imagine you have no way to feed your family. And you don't know where help is going to come from. And now, finally, some answer to your prayer comes, and you have what to eat today. Imagine the restraint it would take to not save for tomorrow. Here, what the Jews are told, the Rashi is explaining, is that on Tuesday morning, on Wednesday morning, on Thursday morning, every day, when you need for today's food, you can only take for today. You can't store anything extra. In fact, the Medrash explains that if they would take more, if they doubted, that tomorrow is going to come more bread from heaven, then the food would just rot. Anything beyond what a day's measure would just rot. Now, that's one condition. But then if we look at text 1c, which is Rashi on the very next verse, on the word, then on the sixth day it will be double. So Rashi explains, for that day and for the morrow. So 6 days of the week, 5 days of the week, you could only take one portion. If you took any more, it was not allowed, it would rot. You had to have faith that every day God would provide. Comes Friday, it's not going to come down on Shabbos. You're not going to be able to go out and find it on Shabbos. So Friday is the one day where you have to take a double. And here, when you take a double, it does last. You do have provisions for that day. So the question we start off with is, what is the purpose of these terms? Why should God make it this way? What does it matter if we store away, if we save? What's wrong? So in the next text 2, we have an explanation of the Kli Yakar. And the Kli Yakar is saying that the lesson that Mana is teaching us is not just that God is providing for our needs, but God is instilling a value into the Jewish people. This is the beginning of a nation. This is the beginning of a destiny, a relationship between God and his chosen people. So from day one, he's embedding a value of reliance on God. So let's see the Kli Yakar of the text number 2. It says, by not leaving any leftovers for the following day, they demonstrated their complete faith. Likewise, by not collecting on Shabbos, they demonstrated their faith that what they collected the previous day would last for Shabbos as well. It's almost as if you could get used to the miracle bread, that bread from heaven, and rely on the fact that it's only good for one day, and then it would be shocking that it lasted for 2 days. So it's in order to kind of continually remind you that nothing about this is natural. Nothing about this is something that we should grow comfortable with. And it's instilling a value to rely on Hashem. Now, so what we see from this idea, from this Parsha story, and it's the beginning of tonight's class, is that manna, the bread from heaven, is a symbol of faith in God. that when we face a difficult situation, like the Jewish people in our Torah portion, when they face a difficult situation, there is a supernatural solution to a serious problem. And this supernatural solution to a serious problem is a beginning value. It's the beginning of the story of the Jewish people, in order to, again, be a fundamental concept in Jewish faith. Now, the next text is later on in this same chapter, and it tells us that the man is not just a story, but explicitly in the story, it is meant to be an eternal reminder of this lesson. So if you look in chapter 16, verse 32, in text 3a in the handout, it says, Moses said, "This is the thing that God commanded. Let 1 omerful of it be preserved for your generations, in order that they see the bread that I fed you in the desert when I took you out of the land of Egypt." I said before, Rashi explained in the Medrash, that you're only allowed to take 1 portion worth, right? There was one exception where you could save the manna, and it's in this text, text 3a. There was one omer amount of manna, which was meant to be saved, almost as like in the Museum of Judaism. This should be an everlasting artifact of this miracle in order to teach this lesson that God provided. And all the generations should see the bread that was provided by God in the desert. Now, text 3b is Rashi in the location, right there in the verse. Rashi explains when the verse says, "for your generations," it means that in the days of Jeremiah, we're talking hundreds of years later, in the days of Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, when Jeremiah rebuked the Jewish people saying, "Why do you not engage in the Torah?" Right? Here's the prophet coming and telling him, "Why aren't you learning more? What's going on?" The people would say, answer him back, "Shall we leave our work and engage in the Torah? From what will we support ourselves?" Right? Maybe this is an answer you even thought on your own. How could I learn Torah all day? I've got to work. I have to make a living. So then Yirmiyahu took out the jug of manna that Moses was required to keep, and he said to them, "You see the word of God? It does not say hear, but it says to see. And with this, your ancestors supported themselves. God has many agents to prepare food for those who fear him." So this manna is an eternal lesson. So it's the lesson for all times. It's the ultimate symbol of trust in God. And now what we're going to see is that when we look at the precise wording of the narrative, it even informs the details of our Shabbos observance until today. There's certain things which you'll notice on a traditional Shabbos table this week which are derived directly from the story of the manna in this week's Torah portion. Now, so let's see, what is that exactly? Text number 4 is from the Shulchan Aruch HaRav. This is the Code of Jewish Law, which was composed most recently by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and then the Orach Chaim there, the laws of the day-to-day life, and the section that deals with the laws of Shabbos. It's chapter 274 there, the first and second halacha, and he explains, we are obligated to eat 3 meals each Shabbos, as alluded to in the 3 mentions of the word today, when the Torah tells of eating the man on Shabbos. So Friday night's meal, Shabbos morning's meal, Shabbos afternoon's meal, those 3 meals all come from today. Now, I don't want to get off on a digression, but what that means is that there is no basis in Torah for what we do now, which is eat 3 meals every day. According to Torah, the basis is only for a morning meal and an evening meal. Lunch is some modern invention. There has no source in Torah. What's unique when you eat 3 meals in a day is Shabbos, for a night meal, morning meal, and afternoon meal, but just on Shabbos. And so back in, I don't want to get off too much of a digression over here, but then it continues in our text 4, the obligation of each meal is only fulfilled by eating bread. For the passage of the man, baked bread. I quoted before, lechem min hashamayim, bread from heaven. So this miraculous sustenance was called bread. So the same thing for us. We're eating on Shabbos bread in order to have our meals because the man was bread. And then the final point he makes over here is we're obligated to break bread on Shabbos with 2 whole loaves. Right? So Friday night, Shabbos morning, you'll see people in the Kiddush, they keep 2 challahs in front of them. These 2 challahs are alluded to in the verse regarding the man, gather a double portion of bread. So what we see is from the precise wording, even counting the number of times it says today, from the precise wording of the narrative, it changes how we observe Shabbos until today. So this lesson of the man, this foundation of trust in Hashem, is something which we live with ritualistically every Shabbos. Now, okay, so why man? Why this story? Why is this the foundation? Now, for a simple reason, it's because one of our greatest challenges to our faith, to our state of calm and peace of mind, is making a living. Right? Everyone. Any dissenting opinions here? No. One of the greatest challenges in the Hebrew is called parnasa, making a living. How are we going to feed our families? How are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to, take in that contemporary worry is how are we going to pay for our health care and our health insurance? How are we going to pay tuition for our children? And especially when it starts talking about college tuition, right? You guys are going through that currently, yeah? College tuition is a big burden. I'm concerned. I've got 7 daughters. How am I going to pay for so many weddings?
But you're God, remember?
Yeah. I never keep telling myself that joke, right? So, not to mention people start thinking about retirement, and now people have the unfortunate, unfortunate, depends on who you're looking at from approach perspective. You start living a lot longer, so retirement lasts longer, you have to pay even more. So all these concerns of making a livelihood, so it makes sense that man should be the lesson, to give us the reassurance that God will provide. Now, we're going to move into a broader perspective, not just man and making a living, but we're going to see other contexts as well. So the next text number 5, there's a book called Chavos HaLevavos, translated here in the English as Duties of the Heart. And it's a fantastic book. They have it translated into English, the entire work. I recommend it. It's one of the classic Jewish ethical texts. And in Chavos HaLevavos, it's broken up into what you call a shar, a gate. So a section of the book. Each section covers a different topic in Jewish ethical teachings. So shar habitachon, the gate of trust. And the gate of trust, it teaches us the idea, and the duty of the heart is as follows. The essence of trust in God is when one has the serenity and confidence that God will do what is good and proper for him regarding any given matter. So the Mun teaches us this foundation, but in the context of making a living. We all understand why we need that foundation, because making a living is maybe one of our greatest challenges, but bitachon is not just paying the bills. Bitachon means in all matters in your life, have trust, have peace, have calm when it comes to the fact that God will provide. So the next few texts, text 6a and 6b, show that they are, even in life and death matters, we have to have the same calm, the same trust in God. So the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20, verse 1 there states, when you go out to war against your enemies and you see a horse and chariot, a people more numerous than you, you shall not be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So here, it's clearly a matter of life and death. You're going out and facing an enemy which is more powerful than you, who wants to kill you. And even in that moment of crisis, you trust in God. You're not afraid. Now, the Rabbeinu Yonah, which is text 6b at the bottom of the slide there, says, we are thus enjoined. If one is in a state of peril, God's salvation shall be in his heart, and he shall rely upon it. This is a Torah's commandment to us that really in all matters, we have to have this reliance on God. We have to have this trust and this peace that comes with realizing that God is going to make it all work out. Everything's going to be okay. Now, I can stand up here. We can all sit very calmly. The lights are on, the heater's running. You know, we all got here, thank God, with no issues and the traffic, whatever it is. So it's easy to say, be happy, be calm, trust in Hashem. But the question is, how can we say this? How can we be so sure, like the verse is telling us, that when we face a difficult situation, it's all going to work out? I mean, it could very well be that each and every one of us, and at one point in our life, had an experience where it didn't work out, right? Not the way we wanted it to. Someone might have lost a job, or someone may have suffered a setback or a failing of some sort. And so, where does this come from? What's the basis for this security, being so sure? Now, the idea that God should rescue us from our problems, feed us when we need food, take care of our livelihood, save us in situations. The idea of trust is that you have the ability to do something. I trust that someone has the ability to do something. I even trust that they will do something. Now, so when it comes to bitachon, when it comes to trusting God, are we trusting that God is able to do it? Or we're trusting that God will certainly do it? And if it's the latter, what room is there for such certainty that God will do exactly as we wish? It will turn out the way we want. Now, this question is even stronger when we think about it from a perspective of like a two-way street. Meaning, God has things that he asks from us, right? We have the mitzvahs. We learn all year in these Torah portion classes about different mitzvahs. And we know it's like if it's a two-way street, God has something to ask from us. We're able to do it, but will we? So now we're going the other way. We're asking from God salvation. He's able to do it, certainly, but will he? And if we think about it from this perspective as a two-way street, if we're not living up to our end of the bargain, then maybe God doesn't have to live up to his end of the bargain. Right? You might think, we might think about ourselves. Who am I to rely on God to save me when I know that I have my own failings? Maybe I deserve a bad outcome because I'm unworthy for that salvation. So if you think about it from this perspective and you think about it, you become less sure, the question's even stronger. What is the basis for trusting in God that he will do what we need when we need it? All right, so let's do this. So that's the next question, text number 7, and this is the text that we're learning from on Shabbos morning. It's from the Likutei Sichos, volume 36, teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, page 3 there at the beginning of the book. He asks, what is the foundation for this certainty that all will be well? Even when there is a clear promise from God, meaning if God would promise to you that everything's going to be fine, like in a way of prophecy, it's possible that the promise will not be fulfilled on account of one sin. So certainly, when there is no outright promise from God, every person must take into account their sins. For there is, as the verse says, there is no righteous one on the earth who will do only good and not sin. So if you're self-aware and you realize that your own failings, if you have a explicit promise from God that everything's going to be fine, your failings might mess it up. So when we don't have direct revelation from God, and we certainly have sins, as the verse is telling us here, what is the foundation? What's the basis for this confidence that God will make it all work out? All right, so that's our big question at the end of part 1. So let's just do a quick review. We have the story in this week's Torah portion, the story of the man. The man is a miraculous salvation from God, that the Jews had food from heaven when they needed it. The man is it's an important lesson. It's a fundamental concept in the birth of the Jewish nation that when we need it, when we need it most, God is there to provide for us. This is not just a story that we read, and we derived this lesson, but the story itself says this is something for us to remember for all times. And later it would come a time, like as we quoted from Rashi, in the time of Jeremiah, prophet Yirmiyahu, that's exactly what the prophet did. He said, don't forget that God is able to provide. Now, this concept that God will provide is in all contexts, all matters. And so our big question at the end of part 1 is, where does this confidence come from? Especially when we think about our end of the bargain. If it's a two-way street, do we truly deserve the type of salvation that we're relying on in the first place? Okay, any questions about part 1? Nope? Okay, so let's move on to part 2. So part 2 is we're going to talk about maybe one approach. We're going to offer this up, and then everybody's going to shoot it down. But we're going to offer it up first. Let's just try to understand what we're offering up first as a possible way of understanding this. Is that we should maybe reconsider what faith in God means. See, up until this point tonight, what we've been saying is that we have faith in God that everything will turn out okay, right? All will be right. God will provide. Now, that could be understood as a positive outcome that we want. In the joke, we're going to have a job and a place to live and food to feed our children, and everything's going to be fine. But some opinions, some Torah scholars and some rabbis have the idea that this is not what faith means. This is not what trust in God means. Faith, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be okay. Faith means that you have peace of mind no matter what happens.
Does it mean, or could it mean that you get not what you want, but what you deserve?
Right, and what you deserve is good. And since it's good, you should be happy no matter what.
And if you take your sins into account, it
right.
should not be what it is. That is my own perception.
Exactly. That even the punishment which I'm getting because I deserve it is good. And I'll be okay with that. There's a nice word for this, equanimity. No matter what happens, it's all the same, right? It's all good. So this is one way to kind of reframe what we mean by faith and trusting God, and that's what we mean. Instead of relying on it being okay and all turning out well in the end, we learn to be okay with whatever happens. So that's the next text number 8. This is back to Likutei Sichos, the teaching of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he reads, one way to explain this concept of bitachon is that everything comes from God. That's first. When a person is in a difficult situation, it is not because the painful circumstances have control over him, God forbid. Rather, it is all dictated from above. Therefore, such a person can be completely calm, based on a simple calculation. If he doesn't deserve any harm, certainly God will save him. And even if this salvation is physically impossible, for nobody can tell God what to do, and God can override the laws of nature. And if he's undeserving of God's kindness, as you said, and deserves it as a punishment, he is nevertheless absolutely calm. For he knows clearly that this pain is from God alone as atonement for his sin. Therefore, his only fear is of God, not whatever outcome will be in the situation. What's more, the Rebbe continues, he understands that this painful time is for his own benefit, as is known that punishment in the Torah is an expression of God's kindness, to cleanse one of his sins. So certainly, either way, there is no room for worry or fear of the situation. So this reframing of what we mean by faith, what we mean by trust is that instead of thinking everything is going to go your way in life, it's even if things don't go your way, they're going God's way. They're going the right way. So if we can release expectations, we can release the expectations, we can release anxiety because we know everything comes from Hashem, that's what we mean by faith. That's what we mean by the peace of mind of trust in Hashem. Now, in order to illustrate how this works, there's a story in the Gemara. There's a story in the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, which is this very concept. So the story reads, a person should accustom himself to say, all that God does is for the good. Right? That's the idea. That's what we just said. Even if it doesn't seem to us good, it's all from God, so it's all for the good. Rabbi Akiva was once traveling and came to a town, but he was offered no lodgings. He said, all that God does is for the good. Right? No place to stay, don't worry, it's all for the good. He spent the night out in the wild. With him were a rooster, a donkey, and a lamb. Now, why is he traveling around with all those things? So it explains over there in that Gemara, I think Rashi explains there, is that the rooster was his alarm clock, so he could get up and, pray in the morning. The donkey was to bear his burden, carry his things. And the lamp was so that when it got to be nighttime, he would be able to learn and pray from the light of the lamp. So this is how a tzaddik travels in the old days, right? A rooster, a donkey, and a lamp. So a wind came and blew out the lamp. A cat came and ate his rooster. A bigger cat, a lion, came and ate the donkey. It's a rough night. So Rabbi Akiva said, all that God does is for the good. That night, marauders came and captured the city. He said to his students, I told you, all God does is for the good. See, so when he didn't have lodgings, he wasn't in the city when he got captured by marauders. When the wind blew out his candle, no one could see him on the outskirts of town. When their donkey and rooster are both eaten up, they can't make any noise to bring any attention. So all of these misfortunes worked out in the end for him. Now, but on the surface, they're misfortunes. And now this happens to be a story where you can see clearly that the bad is also for the good. Right? But even when we don't have such a convenient ending to the story, the same lesson from Rabbi Akiva is true. These things which on the surface are bad, our faith tells us everything that comes from God is for the good. So this is one way of kind of reframing the mitzvah of bitachon to understand how it works. Now, so just to reframe it, we don't have to be sure of the outcomes. What we're saying is that instead of saying, I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids or make this next mortgage payment or how I'm going to, make this appointment on time or whatever situation we're facing challenges, he's saying that's not what bitachon means. If it doesn't work out, you'll be equally calm because it all comes from Hashem. So faith, emunah, versus trust, bitachon, is the next text. The Rebbe doesn't like this answer. The Rebbe is the one who proposes it as a way of understanding how bitachon works. He even quotes we even have a nice quote from a story in the Gemara, but the Rebbe says it just doesn't work. Now, how does it go? It says, this approach is inadequate. Just reframing our reaction to bad things and saying it's all from God, that's not bitachon. For the simple meaning of trust in God is not merely a state of mind, not merely a state of calm that we feel. But what is bitachon? That one trusts that all will work out well in a plain and obvious way. And Rebbe draws a distinction between faith, that everything comes from Hashem. That's true, but that's the mitzvah of faith. Bitachon is distinct from faith in that it is a security. It is a trust that it will be okay. It'll be okay in a way that is obvious to us that it's okay. Not that we have to just keep convincing ourselves that it's good. It appears good to us. This is faith-based trust. So it's like my way versus the right way. What do we mean by that? First, things will go the way God determined. That's the right way, so to say. And this leaves us calm no matter what. But we're going to go a step further and say, no, that's not what bitachon means. We have to have trust. So then if we try to explain where bitachon comes from just by changing your mind about bad things, if we say that that's not really what bitachon is trust that it will be good in an obvious way, so then we're back to our question. Where does bitachon come from? How do you have, what's the basis for such security and such calm in the face of struggle? All right. Any questions about part 2? No? Okay. So the Rebbe provides an answer. The Rebbe gives us an answer in this teaching, which we'll quote from soon. And it says that in order to understand the answer to the question, what's the basis for trust, what's the basis for bitachon, we have to understand its true nature. Now, in order to understand the true nature, the Rebbe in this teaching quotes a story of one of his predecessors, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the third Lubavitcher Rebbe had the same name, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, but he was known by one of his works that he authored as the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek, the story reads like this. This is illustrated, the true nature of bitachon is illustrated by the following story of the Tzemach Tzedek. An individual entreated him to arouse heavenly mercy for someone who was deathly ill, God forbid. Tzemach Tzedek told him, in the Yiddish, Trach gut, vet sein gut. Think good, and it will be good. Now, what does this mean? Think good, it'll be good. What does this mean? What it doesn't mean is that we can relax because things will be good. It's like cause and effect. What's the cause and what's the effect? Do we know that things will be good and that causes us to relax? So the things will be good is the cause and the effect is that we're relaxed? Or is it the other way around? Is the Trach Chut V'Zanga tells us it's the other way around. Because you've relaxed, because you're calm, that is what causes things to be good. The first step to understanding like the true nature of bitachon is to realize that God gives us the power to make things work out. Now, make things work out in a way that we're relying on Hashem, we're relying on God to provide the miraculous control. As we said, everything comes from Hashem, but He's given us the power, this tool, that by trach, by thinking good, we cause it to be good. That's the power of trust, the next slide says. If you think positive, this is what bitachon means. Trusting in Hashem means that certain things will work out the way we want them to. That's what we said in the previous section of the class. And it's the act of thinking itself which causes that to be. So the next text is from a sefer called Ikarim, principles and Chassidus, principles of Jewish thought, principles of belief. So it says, the verse states, but as for him who trusts in God, kindness will encompass him. It's a cause and effect thing. You trust in God, kindness comes. The workings of faith is that it brings unconditional kindness upon those who trust in God. This is our answer. Before, our question was, how could we expect a good outcome? What's the basis for this expectation when we know that we might not be deserving? Not might. We know that we're not deserving. We know that there's blemishes on our record which would cause it so that we have no foundation to rely on God saving us. But now we don't have to have a perfect record. Once we understand that bitachon is a tool that through the act of bitachon itself, that's what causes there to be the right outcome, you don't have to be perfect. It's a hard work that you have to do of the process of bitachon, but you've been given this tool to have a active role in determining the outcome. That's what the next text, 12b, says. This means as follows. Trust is an introspective, soul-searching task. This type of effort, hard work, is what brings God's kindness upon a person. When a person from the depths of his soul truly relies on God alone, to the point that he is not worried whatsoever, this triggers God to bestow goodness upon him, even if he is otherwise undeserving. Do you have like a test? A test for yourself. Next time I face a difficult situation, what is my reaction? If my initial reaction, if my reflective reaction is to be nervous, then you know you have work to do. You have to work on yourself so that your reaction is confidence. Your reaction is trust and security. But it's an active job. It's real work on yourself. And when you put in this work, when you do the job of changing your reaction because of your trust in Hashem, that is the tool you've been given to bring about the positive outcome. It's up to you. That's the idea.
So if, in, let's say, certain situation, you think of this and you tell yourself, I'm calm and I'm confident, things don't turn out
right
anyway. So what's the lesson for me that I should learn from this? I didn't do well enough by didn't trust enough, or no matter what I do, it's still not gonna. It's getting harder and harder every time. It's not turning my way to keep thinking and keep being confident.
So text 12b is saying the first answer you gave. Text 12b is saying if it doesn't turn out, I can tell that it's me. I can tell that I'm the one lacking something. That's what he says. That's what he says. That trust is an introspective, soul-searching task.
Yeah, theoretically, you can understand that should be what you learn from it.
Right.
But in practice, every time it's not, and there are many times obviously like that.
Right.
No matter what you think, it's not going to turn my way.
Right.
The way I understand what's right anyway.
Right.
So, and then they keep doing the same thing and hoping for different results, basically.
Yeah, so that's where I guess you might have the safety net of faith. Meaning, in the earlier part, when we had the Talmud, the Rabbi Akiva story, we had this safety net of faith where, okay, I have this task, I'm faced with a challenge, I have to do the work of having trust. And what the mitzvah of bitachon is saying is that if I'll do my end of the deal of trusting, then the good outcome is going to come, the kind of good outcome that I want to have the good outcome. And then you're saying, well, it doesn't work. So then you have the safety net of faith, which what I mean by that is then, well, this is also good. This outcome, which is not good, according to me, let's just make it clear. Let's say the person they're having cutbacks in your department at your company, and you really need your job, right? So you're hoping you're not one of the ones who is going to be laid off, and
Starting to trust.
Right. So before you learn about bitachon, you're like, oh no, I'm really scared about this. So that anxiety goes against the principle of relying on Hashem. So now we're saying, okay, so by relying on Hashem and thinking good, I'm going to be the one to survive it. And look at Bern, and Bern will tell you how to do it. You told me we went through decades of surviving all these cuts, right?
Mm-hmm. 3 decades of it.
Bern knows how to do this. So you have the active role of making it happen through your bitachon. So let's say you're not as fortunate as Byrne, and you're the person who does get laid off. So then you have this net, which is, okay, then that was also for the good.
There are also, like, if you take it to the extreme, there are situations that are not reversible, such as somebody gets sick and doesn't survive.
Right.
Someone gets harmed and it hurts somebody permanently.
Right.
Leaves the mark. So then it's like, it's really hard to turn it around and say it's good.
Right. Yeah. So I think if you're talking about after the fact, then it's a coping mechanism we're talking about. Now, the bitachon is before the fact. Now, before the fact, that's where the man comes in. Before the fact, the laws of nature, even those we don't have to reckon with, because the man was not a natural solution to the problem. Right? That's the big fundamental concept of the man, is that the salvation isn't limited to a natural outcome. You might have people, God forbid, who are very sick, and it seems like no way naturally it should be able to work. So even for them, according to this lesson, they shouldn't give up hope. They have to be active in having trust, because the man is telling us that natural order is not a limitation. But in your case, where you say something's already happened, that's where it's a coping thing. So it's after the fact.
Not necessarily that's already happened. If like, the relative of somebody is sick, and, if I'm worried, I might take some measures to help.
Right.
If I'm just relaxed and thinking that it's going to turn out, it should turn out.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah.
And looking bigger in a meeting. And it's not turning out well. So the relative dies, for example. How do you keep faith? It's thinking that everything is going to turn out good when something irreversible happens.
Right.
So when you get fired, you can find a different, better job.
Right.
It's different. There could be
Right. That's different than something terminal.
Right.
Right.
But if something terminal happens, then it's kind of harder to.
Right.
Faith.
Yeah, you're bringing up a lot of good points. I mean, one point that I heard is that bitachon is not this free path to do nothing. Right? That's another story in Jacob once heard, right? About the flood. Heard this story.
The woman on the roof
You've heard
of
the
the house.
story of the flood. So the flood coming. This is the story. It's along the lines of the point you're making. The flood's coming, and the rain is coming down, and the first knock on the door from like a fireman saying, it's time to go. The flood is coming. You need to leave your home. So the person says, I trust in God. Things are going to be okay. So then the flood water is coming into the house and getting into the main floor. So the person goes upstairs, and now the fire people, the rescue workers, are no longer banging on doors. They're coming by with boats. And they come by with a boat, and they see still someone's in the house. They come and they give a bang on the window on the top floor and say, come, get in the boat. It's time to go. The flood is here. The person says, no, I trust in God. And that's fine. They leave. They can't get him in the boat. So the flood comes. The house is covered. The person's standing on the roof. And the helicopter flies by, the rescue squad, and says, get in the helicopter. This is it. The flood has come. You're on the top of your house. He says, no, I trust in God. I'll be okay. Person drowns. The flood comes and the person drowns. He gets to heaven and says to God, God, I had trust in you. Why didn't you save me? So God says, what do you mean? I sent someone to knock on the door. I sent a boat. I sent a helicopter. So, trust in God, bitachon, is not a free path to do nothing. You have another balancing act here with a concept that's called hishtadlut, which means to put in your effort. And there's the other joke. I have for this topic, I have lots of jokes. So there's another joke where the guy's screaming. He's at the Western Wall, crying to God, all the different difficulties he has. This kid needs a surgery, and this one has a wedding. This one has so many responsibilities financially, no money. And he's begging God for help. Please, God, just, help me win the lottery. crying to God and praying, and then finally a voice from heaven comes and says, Moshe, meet me halfway. At least buy a lottery ticket.
The same line.
Yeah. So all these jokes are telling the same point, which is that we have to balance faith with action. Another thing which I want to be clear I'm not saying is that this is not a live forever solution. You know, there's no lesson here that you're going to live forever. There's never going to be an outcome. But what's empowering about this lesson is that we don't have to be thrown off by feeling that we don't deserve God's salvation and then give up. The mitzvah of bitachon is something which is a tool that we can be empowered by. We can be active. Now, the last story teaches the positive lesson from like a negative outcome. The last story here we have is an illustrative story, and this is where the sikha comes from. The sikha that we've quoted from comes from the story of Moshe at the very beginning of the book of Exodus. Now Moshe grows up in Paro's house, and when he becomes an adult, he's an activist. He wants to help the Jewish people. So they're slaves, they're suffering, he wants to help them. He goes out and gets involved. Now, the Torah tells us the story that he goes out in order to help the Jewish people to see their burden. And the day that he goes out, he notices an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Jewish slave. Moshe, the verse says, he looks this way, he looks that way, no one's looking. He kills the Egyptian taskmaster and buries him in the sand. Now Moshe, when he looks this way and looks that way and kills him, we have the understanding that Moshe thinks that he got away with this. He thinks that nobody knows. The next day the Torah tells us he goes out again to see the burden of the Jewish people. And this time, two Jews are fighting. And he says to the one who's about to hit him, he's got his hand raised to hit him, he says, "You wicked man, why are you hitting your brother?" So he answers back to him, he says, "You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" Now, that's the next text. The text is the very beginning of the book of Exodus, chapter 2, verse 14. Two men are fighting. Moshe's the one who calls him wicked man, why are you hitting your brother? So this one hitting his friend, has his hand out to hit him, answers him. He says, "Who made you a man? Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you plan to slay me as you have slain the Egyptian?" Moses became frightened, the verse continues, and said, "Indeed, the matter has become known." Paro heard of this incident, and he sought to slay Moses. So Moses fled from Paro. He stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now, the Rebbe, on these verses, and the basis of this teaching that we've been quoting tonight, the Rebbe notes the sequence of events. Now, the sequence of events over here is that first, Moshe realized that it was known that he killed the Egyptian. When these two fighting said to him, "Are you going to kill us like you killed him?" He realized it's known. Now, what does the verse say? This caused him to be afraid. Now, but what we see, what would normally happen if you're afraid that people know you did something wrong? Normally, that fear would motivate you to do something. And what would you do if you're a Moshe? You run away, right? But what we see in this sequence of events is Moshe didn't run away because he was afraid. Paro heard. Paro tried to kill him. That's what he should have been afraid of, right? And then he ran away. So what is the sequence of events? It doesn't make sense. Why is the verse telling us that Moshe was afraid? So what the Rebbe explains is that the fear caused the sequence of events. It's because Moses was afraid, that's what caused Paro to hear. That's what caused the negative outcome that he would have been afraid of. That teaches, a very positive and empowering idea from a negative perspective. It's because he had worry, that's what caused the negative outcome. Which means to us, if we would have confidence, that's what causes positive outcomes. Let's see the next text. This is from the teaching of the Rebbe, which we're quoting from. It says, Moshe expressed fear, not trusting in Hashem, that no harm would befall him, God forbid. And why should he have been confident? This was a noble deed. He's protecting a Jewish man from an Egyptian attacker. He's rebuking two people who are fighting. This lack of faith, demonstrated by Moshe's fear, caused, in a cosmic sense, that Paro should hear of the matter and seek to kill Moshe, compelling him to flee. So, this amazing thing then is that what it's telling us is that this is up to us. This mitzvah, when we reframe it this way and understand it, is that it's up to us. The trust itself is the mechanism. It is the causative power that brings about God's kindness. Now, it's not easy. It's hard work. It's a struggle to instill in yourself this confidence that your initial reaction is to trust in Hashem. But when you do this work, anything is possible. Even the bounds of nature are not a limitation. All right, so let's see the next text. Now, this is a letter of the Rebbe, which the Rebbe is giving practical advice. Now, just to take a step back, the quote from Lakutei Siegel is what I explained before what that is. These are public talks of the Rebbe. We have a whole other library of books called Igros Kodesh, holy letters. And what these are the correspondence, the letters that the Rebbe received from people from all over the world. I mean, talking about hundreds of thousands of letters, probably over the course of his leadership, millions of letters. People would write to the Rebbe about their problems and seeking guidance, seeking blessing, and the Rebbe would write them responses. So we have, thank God, volumes, tens of volumes, dozens of volumes of the letters that the Rebbe wrote in response. We don't have the letters that are received. We can kind of work out many times from the response what the original letter was about. So this is quoting from Igros Kodesh, and it's where the Rebbe is responding to someone in request of guidance about this way of thinking, the bitachon way of thinking. So let's see how text 14a works. So to answer your question, whether you should take a job as a shoichet, a ritual slaughterer, in a town where no minion is available for you to say Kaddish and lead the prayers, and instead you'll rely on your two brothers for that. Well, this job will enable you to earn a proper livelihood and repay the cost of your father's burial. So you can kind of work backwards. What is the person writing the Rebbe about? They have difficult situations for their livelihood, and if they'll take this job that they have an opportunity to take and make a living, it'll mean that it's trade-off. They won't have a reliable minion. So they're writing there, what should I do? What should I give up on? The job or the minion? Whatever answers. Our sages of blessed memory permitted certain things due to the need for a livelihood. So it should be fine. This is specifically so in this case, as your brothers can say Kaddish, etc., and where you have the opportunity to repay the cost of burial, which itself is part of honoring your father's memory. In summation, right, there are reasonable grounds to hire someone to say Kaddish for your father on your behalf. But if we continue, the next text, text 14b, there's a catch. The Rebbe qualifies this response. However, the letter continues. However, I only write all of this because I do not know your level of trust in God. If you are strong in your simple faith and search for a source of income, God will provide your sustenance in a place that does have a meaning and where you will be able to fulfill all your aforementioned obligations. But then everybody's answering him is like, you see this as an either-or proposition because maybe your faith is weak. And I don't know. And if you're asking for a way out because of this either-or proposition you've created in your mind, then you have what to rely on to take the job. There we can see that it probably was the main source of concern for this person. But then he finishes with the qualifier, that's only if you didn't have the necessary faith to realize that the solution that God will provide is right there for you. It's not an easier one. In this letter, the Rebbe is teaching us our responsibility, our job, is to recognize that God runs the world. Everything comes from God, and He can make things work out the best possible way. Now, there's another letter, which is in the handout. And it's the same kind of question. What causes the next thing to happen? So, in the normal course of events, when you hear good news, that causes you to celebrate, right? That's our normal linear progression of events. Good news first, and then we celebrate. Especially when there's difficulty first. Difficulty, good news, then celebration. So the Rebbe says, once you have this understanding of how bitachon works, you can jumble up the order. And what's the jumble? Difficult situation, celebrate, and then the celebration will bring good news. So let's see the next text, text 15. Same source, Igros Kodesh. Said, surely you're familiar with the saying of the Rebbe Maharash. That's the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe Maharash says, the world says that if you cannot crawl under an obstacle, try to leap over it. However, I say, leap over it to begin with. So in the expression in the original language, this is the English translation. First, you jump over. That's the Rebbe Maharash's approach. So he says, of course you know this, right? The Rebbe answers in this letter. The same applies in this situation. Though it would seem appropriate to wait until your health improves to rejoice, perhaps in this spirit, you should first celebrate your improved health, which has not yet come, and this itself will hasten the improvement. And this is like the well-known saying of the Chabad Rebbe's, Trach gut wird sein. Think positive, and it will be positive. This is, you asked before, how should we handle it, when it comes to difficult health matters, but everything, celebrate like it's already okay before it is, and that approach helps make it that way. Now, this is physical. In both of these cases, there's livelihood, which is physical, and it was health, which is physical. The next issue, which here's the Hatchila Reber picture, right? The guy's taking a jump over here. Jump first. I say to begin with, the very beginning, you should jump. And by making that jump, celebrating first, that causes the good news to come. This is the last text of the night, and this shows it's not just in material matters, it's in spiritual matters as well. This is the final quote from Likutei Sichos, the volume that we're learning on Shabbos morning. It says, when a person encounters difficulties in the observance of mitzvahs and the study of Torah, he ought to know that the solution lies within. If one has complete trust in God that He will help and that all will be good, to the point of absolute tranquility with no worry whatsoever, and together, of course, with doing all one physically can to deal with these challenges, then we are promised, trach gut wird sein gut. Think positive, and it will be positive. And so it will truly be there, it concludes. All challenges and hardships will disappear, and all will be good in an obvious and clear way. That's the balance. That's the balance between worry and happiness, which comes from the story of the man. It comes from this mitzvah of bitachon. The way it works, that we understand, is that it's difficult. It may be difficult to do a mitzvah. This last text is telling us it might be hard to do something like keep Shabbos. It might be hard to keep kosher. It might be hard to live in a life in this world with all its challenges according to what the Torah wants from us. Now, we might feel that we have to bend a little bit in order to fit in to the challenges of the world. But it's not just a physical mentality that we're hoping for a good livelihood and health and these old material blessings. But I was saying it's a spiritual perspective as well. The same God that runs the world and can provide for your livelihood is the God that runs the world and can bend the natural order to your spiritual growth as well. That we have to know that God's on our side and think good and it'll be good for what appears to be obstacles for our spiritual growth as well. And I guess the final point is, summation is that our attitude in life is not just a superficial matter. Being happy is not just a better way to be. You know, we mentioned at the beginning, being worried is counterproductive. It doesn't really change things often. But being happy and being sure, being confident, that does. The same way that being worried is unproductive, being confident, it is productive. It's transformative. All right, any questions?
I don't know. I just have.
You what?
I have questions on every chapter.
Every one of these? All right, let's.
I mean, it just sounds just be positive and it will bring goodness. How is the physicality? I mean, to me it sounds just too simple. Like everybody's gonna only if you think positive, everything will be wonderful. That's not right. That's not true.
Right.
If everybody all of a sudden decided to think positive, but it's not gonna be all good still. I mean, and then we can say, oh, you think it's not good, but it's actually good.
Right.
But then it doesn't even matter how you think. Whatever happened, that's what's going to happen. And it doesn't sound right to me because then it kind of leaves God out of the equation. Whatever happened, and just think that it's good and that's it.
Right.
So that just makes me almost angry about this topic because I don't think it's that simple.
I'm glad you said it this way because it isn't that simple. And
so what's actually happening? Okay, I'm thinking positive.
Right. It's not you.
Trying.
What he's saying is it's not you that is making the positive outcome happen. It's God that's making that positive outcome happen. But the question is, how do we get God to make the positive outcome happen if we shouldn't get positive outcomes, if we don't get positive outcomes?
Right.
Like, one way you could ask your question is, well, you have a difficult life, right? You've had lots of setbacks and lots of failing, lots of pain and suffering.
Right.
And so you come from the perspective is like, how dare you, Rabbi, tell me that everything is fine if I would just think it's okay? Like, you think I asked for all this suffering? And it is offensive.
It just sounds too simple.
Right. I'm glad you asked this way. Now, we're not saying that you, just by your simple state of mind, are going to change anything.
Right.
What we're answering is that that's a powerful tool that you've been given by this mitzvah for God to change everything.
I think it just says by you thinking worse, you don't make it better.
No, we're saying you do make it better.
If you think negative,
right,
you don't make it better.
Right.
So if you try to keep the positive outlook,
right, that's just a better way of being anyways.
Yes.
Right. But then there's no real impact on the outcome. It just means that you're going to have a better day.
You do what you can, but by just
right. So it's like almost like a formula, right? It's like, okay, there's going to be layoffs this afternoon, right? I'm waking up this morning, and by the time I come home tonight, I'm either going to have a job or I'm not. Right? So what are my two options right here, right? I have a decision tree in front of me. I could be miserable all day and think that I'm going to lose my job and be worried and my stomach's going to be in knots and I'm going to get a headache and it's going to be a terrible day. And then think how much more terrible it's going to be when I actually do lose my job. So I might as well think good because at least until this afternoon, it'll be a better day. Because ultimately it's out of my control, right? They're gonna fire somebody. So I didn't need to speak this long to tell you if you just think better, it'll be at least better for one day. So that's not what we're saying here. It's a good point. Without anything mystical or faith-based, it's a good point. You might as well have a good day. Why not? Now, here we're saying you have no way of controlling this directly. Not meaning like between you and the boss or between you and the company. There's no way. This is out of your control. So, but the mitzvah of bitachon is saying, wait a second. You should be calm. Not because it's just a better choice. You should be calm because there's a mitzvah to be calm. So you say, wait a second. What kind of mitzvah could it be to be calm?
Find a better job.
What's that?
Later we'll find a better job.
Yeah. So as what you said before, it's a bad outcome, but it's one door closes, another opens. It's like a mindset, right? It's still another mindset concept. It's a positive psychology trick. So saying no, that's not it either. It's going to be good, really. You're going to be the one who keeps the job. So you're back to the question. What do you mean? It's silly. Why should my mindset have anything to do with me getting the job? And because God is going to be the one who gives you the job. God is going to save you. That's the story of bread from heaven. God gave us bread from heaven. It's a big miracle. God can make sure you're the one who keeps the job in the afternoon. Another big miracle. Great. So then it says, well, wait a second. If it's God who's going to give me a miracle job this afternoon, and that's why I have positive psychology, maybe I'm a little silly. That seems silly. Like, how could a miracle happen just by the way I'm thinking? Doesn't make any sense. Especially doesn't make any sense if you're going to buy into miracles, that I should be the one that gets the miracle. Right? Because I don't deserve a miracle. And I didn't get a miracle yesterday. There was no miracles yesterday. I don't deserve a miracle. So this whole thing seems silly. Like, why should God make a miracle? Right from heaven, what are you talking about? So the answer that I was giving is that itself is the mitzvah. God is the one going to make a miracle. But he's not going to make a miracle just for you. He's not going to make a miracle, without any cause and effect. What's the cause then? How do I make God make a miracle? That's what the mitzvah of bitachon is. The way you cause God to bring about a miracle is by your work of feeling good. Now, feeling good means it's natural to not feel good. It's natural to have doubt, right? It's even smart to have doubt, right? Because risk aversion and decision trees and probabilities and, making good decisions, hishtadlus, like I said before, doing the proper exertion of effort to make yourself be more likely to have good outcomes. Those are all things you're supposed to do. So if all of that I'm supposed to do, then maybe doubt's a good thing, right? It's a natural thing. That's what everybody's saying over here is how we understand the mitzvah of bitachon. The mitzvah of bitachon is not some fantastical thinking to elicit a godly miracle. It is a tool that God gave us that we can trigger a miracle even when we don't deserve it. Even when it shouldn't work out that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
It makes better sense?
Yeah, right. But
So-
one second. But then I'm thinking, how did they come to this conclusion? Is there like a statistical data? Like, okay, this person really, it's just, okay, I understand that if I decide, if I trust, if I have my trust, then it kind of brings down the goodness.
Right.
It's supposed to.
Right.
Supposed to, and I have to stay calm. Okay, I'm going to be laid off tomorrow, but I'm going to stay calm, and that should bring the goodness, the godliness down and help me somehow.
Right.
That's what the class is about. And it's only on the example of mana, how this all came down to this equation.
Right.
It's like really.
So the equation, good. How do we get here? The way we got here was the story of Moshe. See,
I had another question about the story of Moshe. You're saying it started, the bad thing started when he became afraid.
Right.
And I'm thinking maybe the bad thing started when he killed somebody, because the guy is bad, but you're not supposed to kill. It still has some bad element to it. So
Right.
maybe it started there, not when he became afraid. And if it started there, then it's not the trust that he didn't have
Right.
from the very beginning.
Right. It's a good point. It's a good question. Now, one approach to if it was good or bad that Moshe killed him. So I'm not going to say that it's ever good to kill anybody. That's above my pay grade. But the Medrash explains how did Moshe kill him. So the way that Moshe killed him, according to Medrash, was by uttering a divine name.
Mhm.
It wasn't that he hit him over the head or stabbed him or anything. He didn't kill him in a normal manner. He killed him eliciting God's name.
It's basically God's help.
God's
assistance.
Yeah.
Or
It was
direct.
the tactical
So it's
process
not
that
the
followed.
regular
It wasn't a murder like the way we
Okay.
understand it. It was like God, calling on divine energy. If this is what's supposed to be. Now, when it says he looks this way and that way, Rashi explains, doesn't mean that he's like going to see the eyewitnesses. It says he looks this way or that way. So Rashi, what Moshe was looking is prophetically. Was there any reason for this? Was there any merit that this person had at all? Like, was there even going to be even any positive outcome from his descendants? And Moshe was able to see prophetically that this was someone who was only bad, and he didn't kill him in a murderous way. He killed him by uttering one of God's names. So that's a little bit softened the
It's
story.
better, yeah, then it's
A little bit softens the story. But again,
uh,
I'm not here to tell you that if you know how to do that, go ahead and kill people. That's again not the point. But you ask a very good question. Maybe that's the beginning of the difficulty.
Mm.
So it's going back to this principle that we've said a lot of times in class, which is that the Torah doesn't put anything in the narrative that is extra.
Mm.
So if it's just the narrative, right? Moshe's afraid. Well, everybody would be afraid, right? If you do something which has the likelihood of negative repercussions, you could get in trouble for doing this in a big time way. And if you take a step back, Moshe could really get in trouble for this because Moshe grew up as the suspected redeemer of the Jewish people. And the whole time Paro has been wanting to kill him. Remember, how did Moshe get adopted into the family in the first place? Because Paro said, throw all the babies in the river, murder every single Hebrew boy that's born in this time. And while that decree is standing, they pull this baby out of the river and adopt him. He's got death hanging over his head his entire life. So Moshe has what to be afraid of. But the Rebbe's point over here is that when the narrative tells us he's afraid, it makes perfect sense he's afraid. But it does nothing for the story. By the fact that it does nothing for the story, meaning, what does it mean there's nothing for the story? Moshe didn't act on his fear. He didn't do anything to act on the fear. So if he's not going to do anything because of the fear, and we would expect him to be afraid anyway, then why is the Torah telling us he's afraid?
I thought he did do something. He left Egypt.
Only after Paro tried to kill him. What would he be afraid of? We normally read the story just superficially. He would be afraid that what? Paro would try to kill him, right?
That the guy the next day, the Hebrew guy, says, "Are you going to kill me like you killed him?"
Right.
He got afraid because then he said, "It's known what I did."
Right. And once it's known what I did, there's going to be repercussions, right? So you would think he would try to cover it up, or he would run. Moshe doesn't do anything. Moshe doesn't try to run until Paro tries to kill him. So then, if that's the flow of events, Moshe's fear is extra in the story. We don't need to know this. And extra writing is good for fiction writers, writing novels is paid by the word. But in the Torah, we don't. That's not how it works. If there's extra information, then we have to ask, why is it there? So that's the how we know, so to say. The way that the whole basis of the Rebbe's teaching is on this extra information about Moshe being afraid. So what he's saying is it's not extra. That detail in the story is there to tell you that if you would take the fear out of the story, then there would be no trying to kill Moshe. There would be no reason to run away. The positive outcome would have been the natural outcome were Moshe to have bitachon.
So if he wouldn't be scared, Pharaoh wanted to kill him, he would.
Yeah, or he wouldn't have ever found out. It's like Moshe's fear is what caused Paro to find out.
I mean, I understand it. It sounds wonderful. If
Sounds plausible.
If we have the two, that sounds wonderful. It's just, I don't know how to rely on it.
Yes,
like,
so if there's obviously no statistics how it works because you can't measure how deeply you believe.
Right.
But you can always.
Yeah, it's almost like not fair because I have it built into my lesson that if it doesn't work, it's your fault.
Right.
Right.
Basically, that's what you have to assume.
Well, yeah.
but that's what how Rebbe responded with the letter.
If
He's
this
like,
is the tool that
yeah,
that
you can
didn't
take
work.
this job, but I'm not sure how you deep your trust
Right.
is.
If only you'd have more faith, you
So
wouldn't need this
he's
job.
basically not answering like, you figure it out. Basically. You can take it or
Yeah.
not.
With that understanding that you have a tool to influence God,
Yeah.
Right.
then it means that it didn't work. Then you didn't use it well enough. You believe in
That's
divine
right.
power, or
But
sincerely and
that's where it says like it's introspective. No one's gonna know if you have confidence except for you.
And I don't know. There's something. I always have my doubts.
Right.
For example, I believed, but if something didn't have turned out my way, it
Right.
means I thought I believed, but it didn't. So.
See, my question
believe
is like
enough.
the opposite. My question is, so based on this, I know that maybe my bitachon is lacking. I know that my trust is weak. So how come these good things keep happening? It's like, I see people struggling with their livelihood and their kids and these type of things, and it's like, wait a second. So according to this, it means that they're lacking in their bitachon. But my bitachon is not so great either. So how come it keeps working out?
It's the other side of the same point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like somebody is not really.
Right.
Yeah.
Good things happen.
It's like, now I'm really nervous, right? I had a good day. That means right around the corner is what's coming,
So, Rabbi, I have a comment, and this is following up on what we were studying on Shabbos, that, God is good.
Yeah.
Hashem is good.
Yeah.
And everything that happens is good if it's from Him. So the difficulties that we get are the punishment and the consequences
Right.
of some action that we've taken. It may not be instant.
Right.
So we may have to think back and say, what did I do? Was this from yesterday, the day before? And it may not be, like an eye for an eye
Right.
in the consequence. So when they says look in, okay, so what did I do? What must I correct
Right.
in order to understand that?
And that makes it even harder to have bitachon.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're talking about you're having bitachon, and at the same time that you're balancing the concept of reward and punishment, like, wait a second, I know that this shouldn't work out good for me, because that whole reward and punishment thing is so that makes it even that much harder to be active in your positive thinking. Relaxed, calm.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you were saying something.
The Hebrew expression is called menucha gemura, complete tranquility.
Okay. Let's say the next day there is important, whatever, the court hearing, whatever, something, and you're supposed to be calm, and you're supposed to be trusting, but you cannot control your thoughts.
Right.
You're laying down in bed, and the thoughts are just coming and coming and coming, and how to stop it.
Right.
Even if like I try to pray like my own way, and it doesn't stop it.
Right. So this, as far as a practical advice,
Right.
a practical advice is to verbalize and to visualize the positive outcome.
Okay.
Like that, so.
Like affirmation.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so the court case, whatever is at stake here. So what does it look like once the court case is over? What does the good outcome look like? So say it, and then visualize it and think about it. And now, this is a different thing. It's not a Torah basis, but I'm going to tell you something. There's studies that they've done like this. This is statistics now. They took in the basketball, and they took basketball players, and they split the basketball teams up, and they took half the team, and they taught them the technique of shooting free throws, proper footwork and bending the angles of your knee properly to get proper form, follow through, visualization, the whole thing, and they practiced for like an hour. They took the other half of the team, randomly distributing the abilities of the players. They took the other half of the team, put them in the locker room, and then walked them through the same practice, but here just visualizing. Imagine your feet are here. Imagine your knees bend like this. Imagine your thoughts are like that. And then they said, this is the difference of the study, is that in the team that's in the locker room, they visualized every shot went in. Whereas the ones practicing for real on the court, they were missing the normal amount of shots. But the team in the locker room, every single shot as part of this visualization went in. So then they've done this test many times. When you put the groups back together, the group that visualized their performance outperforms the one that actually practiced.
It hit because we were
I
learning tennis.
Yeah.
And then we were watching, and our teacher said, watch it. And actually, when you watch tennis, and you don't move, you don't do the moves at all. But then when you're on the court, you kind of, how.
Right.
You know how.
You
play better.
you can't make corrections if you don't know what you're doing wrong unless you're really trying. That's why it's strange.
That's why they coached them through all the things. They were doing everything mentally. They were practicing, right foot in front of the left by 2 inches, and then this much of an angle, the knee bending, the whole thing. They were doing it, but with the outcome being positive. Now these were players who played. It wasn't like they were starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But this is just an aside. It's a fascinating research to show that the effect of visualization. So that's the technique when it comes to how do we do that? How do we get beyond our natural reaction of anxiety? It's through visualizing and verbalizing what the positive outcome is. That has a strong impact on us as well. And we have a constant inner dialogue. So you have to give yourself the words for the inner dialogue to be positive.
We'll see. We'll test it.
That's what I said. It's like it's not fair, right? Because if it messes up, it's you.
Well, to blame.
Yeah. How much better of a teacher could I have, right? It's your fault if it messes up.
Yeah.
I think you got a question up there?
Oh.
Is that a question?
No. No, the quote there that I was looking at.
Okay.
The third from the left.
Yeah, I think I heard they hung up already. No, I
Came back
Okay.
in, I think, after the beep out or beep in.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.